Dan. Dan, nice to meet you.
Oh, ah, nice to meet you too. I'm a bio student. Well, my
Oh,
name's
great.
Daniel. Name's Daniel, but I just like go by a bio student. So that was like a kind of like a surname or
Wow.
not surname, sorry, a pen name.
Yeah, excellent. Are you in college, university?
Not yet. Well, I'm gonna be going there in
Okay.
September.
Yeah. Excellent. Fantastic. And so you're going to actually study what?
Well, as my name implies, biology. I'm a bio
Okay.
student, just an ordinary bio student. That's why
Okay. Great.
going into
That's
bio. What about you, sir?
no, that's a great field. That's a great field. Yeah, I've spent 40 years in basically business administration type stuff. Yeah, not real exciting.
Well,
Pays the bills, but yeah. Yeah. What you're going into is lot more probably so much more to discover.
I
So
mean,
that's excellent.
yeah, but it also could be kind of boring because like you're pipetting and then you're pipetting again and then you're centrifuging. It's just like you gotta like do this like on a repeated cycle, and sometimes you just gotta like go. It just feels like a bit robotic, but it's about the discovery. It's about making it to the end and just seeing like whether it worked or
Yeah.
whether it failed, and just making it, yeah, as you say, like a discovery. It can be fun, it can be boring. It depends.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It's probably tedious. It's probably, a lot of time spent, waiting for results, right? So that's the part that's,
Yeah.
tough. It's patience. Takes patience. A lot of patience. Yeah, I couldn't do something like that. I need to see something right away. But that's great. That's fantastic. My son sort of did that sort of thing. He went into kinesiology. A big fancy word.
Kinesiology, the study of like human movement, right? Kinesiology, the study of human
Yeah,
movement.
it's somewhat similar to I guess which physical therapy. It's a related
Yeah.
field. Yeah, but you got yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, well, like for mine, it's much more of I'm trying to look at like the molecular to like the cellular level. My bachelor's
well,
specifically molecular and medical microbiology, and
yes.
it's well, I haven't taken any of the classes
Okay,
yet. I don't know what's
but
gonna be.
still, promising, very promising field. This is where the advancements are going to take place. In the future. So, yeah, I applaud that. That is a great field to go into. So, yeah, excellent, excellent. Keep up the great work. I know it's hard work, but you got to stay. It's something worth for you.
So, what exactly like made you come here? Like,
Well, this is why exactly this. It's just
no,
just to talk with people. Can I just say this? Where I live, the neighbors, it's kind of strange. They just don't come out. They stay inside their homes. There's not a lot of interaction here in the area that I'm in, and it's I've talked to other people about it, and it just after a while, I just have to try to say hello to somebody, because it's like that. And I work 5 days a week from home, through social media, through Zoom, through Microsoft's product. So I'm online virtually with other people, but yeah, but it's all of course it's about what I'm doing. It's about my work. Whereas this is more relaxing. I can chat and talk about things. And I just find I just have it. I really like hearing from younger people about what they're doing, like yourself, and futures and things like that. There's something about me that I just I love to hear about an optimistic story, good news story. So
yeah,
we have enough of the bad. Yeah.
it,
So
I also am just trying just to find like some interesting like of other people for even like with me like going into biology. I even like want to go because like if you want to like know a bit about like as a young individual like myself, even though I want to go into like this type of bachelor field, I even like want to go further. I want to go into like ones like enzymology, um, because the reason why is because you know like how some people are like lactose intolerant, right?
Right.
So
Big problem. Yes.
yeah, when I was going through intro to biology, my professor, sir, he mentioned about like there's this new niche field. I think it was about like it was more about like 1980s or so. Even then, before then, it wasn't fully understood, and it was called enzymology, the study of enzymes.
Uh-huh.
And the
Yeah.
thing about enzymes is that because it's so new, it's a niche field, but it can be able to make like some great breakthroughs, and we still don't know a lot about it. It's like genetics. Like we can map an entire genome, but we don't know what most expressions do. We don't know like what most proteins do. And when it comes to like specifically looking further in like let's say enzymology, what makes that great is that and then my intro to cell professor was even mentioning that that's like a big multi-billion-dollar industry. If you can be able to find a way to make bacteria digest like plastic, rubber, like a lot of trash that we have, and maybe turn that into like something else like useful fertilizer. So you can be able to like just turn like entire like trash into like useful fertilizer for farmers. That's a huge industry. That's like a multi-billion-dollar industry right there. And I was like,
See, this is why this is great. Excellent. Yeah, I've heard these kinds of things from a few folks, but never this good of the amount of detail I'm hearing from you. This is and can I just share with you over in Maryland, just across the Potomac River from us, Maryland, Southern Maryland, it has a large biotech industry. It's present, so we get to hear about it a little bit. Little bits and pieces about what they might be up to and things that they're working on, like what you're talking about. Where you can take, or actually, in the future, maybe possible. You tell me, maybe somehow turn something into oil. Create oil out of, or have bacteria or something that creates, energy supplies for us. That's renewable.
oh yeah, definitely. The thing about biology to me is that there's just like so much, and I even always like make a point that no matter what, we're always gonna need scientists because there will always be questions to problems, and even when we like find one answer, 5 questions just pop up. You're just never gonna find an answer to something. You're always gonna be like looking for something.
So this,
And I even said, I even like said something about astrobiology. So when I was doing a presentation, when I was in my communications class, I did a presentation on bacteria, and one of the main points I was talking about was that bacteria in space, and bacteria in space, and like bacteria perhaps like on different planets, bacteria on different, or basically like different celestial bodies, so like moons, planets, and I was just like thinking, like we really could use like a lot more discovery, and that would be really useful because seeing like what life would be like with like the different types of atmospheric pressure, gravitational pull, precipitation levels, there's just so much to see there, and I'm like, and that's just fascinating. Astrobiology, that is like going to be like a new
well,
field.
you're extremely right. That's excellent. I applaud your inquisitive mind, and that's what it takes. That is just. You just said some things that I've never even heard anybody say. I've never heard anybody discuss that. How that could be very relevant or could change the world. When you find bacteria on a different planet, or wherever, right? How is it that bacteria can survive in space? But it does, right? We know that now, don't we?
And what even makes it interesting about that is it can even give us an idea as to like how did we come about, maybe we'll even be able to like see like how do these organisms form in these sorts of environments, because before we still don't know like how we came about. We know like I think the first one we usually know is like bacteria, the very first cellular being and single cell organism on this planet was bacteria, but we don't know exactly how did that happen, right? Like how do we have like these lipid structures in like such an inhospitable environment? How do we go from like this inhospitable to a hospitable? But even when it's hospitable, how does it still form life? Because life doesn't just pop up. Something has to come in that forms this connection between all of them, and that's why it's like we still got questions. There ain't no end to biology. There's no end to chemistry. No end to mathematics. There's no end to it.
That's amazing. That's a great conversation to have. Because we take life for granted in so many ways. But when you get down to what you just discussed, it's like, oh my goodness, we realize, how just what you said, how this all happened. I have to say one thing. I'm amazed by how is it that this planet has, when we observe our planet from outer space, it just looks like this unbelievable, oasis from outside, and all this water that we have. I just can't get over the fact that supposedly this was a rocky planet at the outset, and yet now we've got these huge oceans, and I'm a big fan of I watch another thing I do is I watch these programs which just play music, and they do flyovers of just beautiful seas and Caribbeans and different all over, even in the northern hemisphere, in the oceans and Indonesian oceans and the Hawaiian oceans. And it's just the life here. It's just you have to stop and look at that and just say to yourself, it's just so absolutely beautiful. It almost looks like something from Avatar sometimes. Some of these
I feel as though like speaking of that, like James Cameron's Avatar, I think like his ability just to like see like what would life be like on another planet and like the structures that they form that's a bit creative. That's really like beautiful and like very creative.
It really is, and it's really amazing. That whoever came up with all of that, it's very, very, very interesting. It makes you think that maybe that's the way of, if we have beauty, the kind of beauty that I just described that we have here, maybe there are other planets that are even more beautiful than what we have. It makes you wonder, Yeah, that's great stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, James Cameron. Beautiful. So listen, I was just thinking too the other day about something you mentioned, and of course I didn't know I was going to have an encounter, with someone like yourself. But I often do have to ask the question, is without water, is it possible to even have any kind of life? Is water a precept to life? Is it absolutely necessary, or is it, how to your point about bacteria, in fact, does bacteria need to have water or some kind of moisture?
So, while I will say most of life does need water, that's usually because there is a type of organism that kind of like shrivels up, kind of goes like into stasis. It's called like a water bear. It does not activate until like water's like around it, or at least like conditions are more right. But even then, I would say that yes, water is absolutely crucial for any form of biological process. I would say like as at least as we have known. I do not know if there might be a bacteria that does not need water. I mean, there are some bacteria known as abiotic bacteria, bacteria that does not need oxygen. And instead, what they do is that they do what's known as, they're like chemolithoautotrophs. So they chemically break down like lithium or like an autotroph. That's why they basically like eats and survives is based off these like basically like deep underground where there's like no oxygen, no way of oxygen even being there, and that's why they'll call like a chemolithic autotrophs. And these organisms, and what even makes it even better is that these very organisms typically are like at geothermal vents, very hot, way hotter than any of us could ever handle.
Yes.
And no other organism should even be able to live there, but they can.
Right.
And this very thing
Yeah.
also helped us in the development of what's known as a PCR, or a polymer chain reaction, that helps us create like DNA replication, which is very useful for like gene mapping, useful for like vaccine research and development. It's just like a lot we could do, and that's why I'm like, that's absolutely incredible. So the question of, is there bacteria, that can survive without water? I would say as of right now, that at least that I know of, we all still need water regardless. But is it possible? It might be. But then in that case, it would have to be like an alternative. I don't know what it would be like.
Yeah, it'd have to be. Yeah, it just would be something alien almost, wouldn't it?
It would be alien. And
Yeah.
so,
So that's fascinating. Yes, yeah. So you mentioned PCR, polymer chain reaction. It's interesting you mentioned that. So yeah, so the replication, the use of that. Now is that also an enzyme? Is that basically what it is? PCR? Is that a
oh no, so a PCR, or polymer chain reaction, at least I think it's like the machine itself. What it does is that it helps in the replication of DNA. Okay, but DNA itself replicates to these other types, like I think it was like what's known as like a helicase. Oh god. If my biology professor was to see me, he would be mad. He's like, how do you like not remember this? I was like, well, there's so much, professor. But anyway, so like, yeah, it's like a type of like helicase that ties up to like this one side of the DNA, and it unzips it. It unzips like everything. So then it has two strings, and then another piece comes up, ties it, that binds up to like one side of the DNA, and then just reads along with it, and basically like replicates what's known as semi-conservatively. And the semi-conservative replication is basically like using the original strand of DNA. So it's not like it's using like new types of strands of DNA, because if it's using new ones, then it could be a problem. You want to remain as concise as possible. You want to basically like preserve like your original self as best you can, because if we just make you like entirely like new, this new thing could be like detrimental. It could be facing like different types of mutations. It's basically more problematic. So semi-conservative.
So the PCR
It's just a machine.
So the PCR, yeah, it's a machine, right? So it can amplify. In other words, if you have a very small piece of DNA, let's say you have you have a situation where you have a threat. Okay, let's say it's someone that means harm, but yet you've got some little piece of DNA, and you wanna replicate it over to get enough of it, so you can actually verify that what the heck it is, right? So the amplification process, right? So for example, if you had, let's say you had some anthrax, and you used PCR to so you could then make sure that it's what it is, and then then you could, let's say if there was a threat, then they would know it, and they could then let people know, okay, we've got anthrax on our hands, and everybody needs to evacuate or something.
Oh yeah, the idea of so actually like a bit more of a better one would be because this is the one thing we had to test for was COVID. We use like a PCR as a way of like seeing whether like what whether like the sputum that you just like spit out out what well maybe not sputum, it's just like a saliva, but saliva test will do, and we just like replicate whatever specifically we're extracting for, and if it does not show up based off this PCR peak, then you don't have COVID. So we do use PCRs as a way of like identification, and it's a lot more quicker and cheaper to than like a blood test.
A petri, right? Yeah, like for example, if you know if you have something and they get a little swab or something, and in the old days, right, used to have to put it in a culture or petri dish, as they say, and then they grow it for 24 hours, right? And
Yes.
then you find out what you, right? But PCR accelerates that tremendously, doesn't it?
Yeah, basically it helps cut a lot of the I would say like part of my French, but it basically like cuts the bullshit. It cuts a lot of like the tedious work of like having to wait. Just like okay, we collected a sample and we're letting it grow and just see like what you have it or not. It's like we don't want to deal with that, and we don't also want to run like these highly expensive specialized tests to do it when we could just do this much more cheaper inconvenience one. Right, like it's cheaper, far more
Yes, got
convenient.
it. Excellent. See, this is great. This is great. This is, people also, sometimes we say, okay, gee, I better bundle up. I don't want to catch a cold. I'm, what's your comment about that?
Like you got a cold and you just like stay at home.
But no, in other words, what people say is that a lot of times you'll hear people say, they'll say, oh, you better bundle up. You better, it's cold and nasty out. You don't want to catch a cold. Well, the cold virus. I mean, that's probably
Oh,
why you're not getting. Yeah.
so
Is that
like the
right?
thing
Yes.
about yeah, so like the common cold or like influenza, the real thing that way about how it spreads is just like through bodily fluids. And it's I would say like you're much more likely to get sick by not going outside and just being out in open space.
Oh,
Or like if you're living alone and you keep the room clean, then you're less likely to get the cold anyway. Right.
yes. True.
The thing
Right.
is
That
a
makes
common
sense.
cold or influenza, you usually get that just from like another person through the exchange of bodily fluids. So like from like your nasal cavity or from your mouth. Oh, so like maybe like someone coughs or like they sneeze or they like typically a very common one that some people do is like they just like wipe their hands like they get like their hand and like rub it like on their nose. They got like the snot and sometimes like they would uh might like touch their hand with like that still contains like some mucus, and then like touch someone else or touch something. Sometimes people don't even like wash their hands before they eat, and then they get sick. It's basically like
Right.
you get sick just by from like other people and also like from yourself or from like
Right.
not being safe.
Right. Exactly. See, this is why, professionals, they tell us, which is so true, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands.
And
Yeah, it's so
you
true.
always like wonder, well, why do like surgeons like wash their hands like so much like before and like after surgery? It's like well because and not just that too. Surgeons would also have to have someone help them dress. Like doctors can't dress themselves. Like
Yes.
sometimes like when they even have a mask, they have someone else put the mask on for you. You don't put on the mask.
It's not
And you don't touch your mask.
right.
Don't touch your mask. Don't put on a mask. Someone else will do it for you.
Yes. See, it's not the drama. We think, okay, it's this big drama thing, Yeah, it's not about that. It's about, yeah, right. You're so right. That's great. That's awesome. So, let's see here. Anybody else wants to join, they can join. Um, but, yeah, so, see anything on the horizon that's going to propel? If you had to pick one thing that you think might propel mankind forward, what do you think it might be? Do you have a thought on that?
Oh, so like a great scientific breakthrough that would bring great change. Like are you saying like Albert Einstein's theory of relativity helped? Well, actually, his theory of relativity helped in like a lot of discoveries in like nuclear energy, satellites, especially satellites. Like we rely on his relativity for satellites. My physics teacher was even talking about that, and so do I see something like that? Oh man, I'm trying to think. I could see that, but I don't know what it could be. A great
It
breakthrough.
could be anything.
A great breakthrough
It's
that will
hard.
push mankind.
Forward, yeah.
Um, I think it would be biosynthetics.
Biosynthetics.
So like artificial organs, so like artificial kidneys, livers, um, basically that would be a multi-trillion dollar industry. I'm not saying billion, it's trillion because that literally could save so many lives. I was even thinking about this like what about like an artificial pancreas, right? So like people will no longer need to have like insulin. Now they could just like have this plant that can like last them for like 10, 20, maybe even 40 years. Yes, but maybe let's say about like 5 or 10 years at least. But this artificial pancreas is like you just have it installed, and it will like give you insulin automatically. It will even produce its own insulin, and it will produce the insulin for your body specifically. So something like that, like artificial organs, like biosynthetics. I would say in that case, that's a great breakthrough. That would be a great breakthrough for
I
all of
see
us.
that. Excellent commentary on that. Excellent thoughts. That's wonderful. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, so there you go, guys. Listen to what he has to say. And, this has been a fantastic interview and a chat with you, on so many levels. I can't thank you enough. And this is why, I just can't say enough about what you just have said. So that's fantastic. I can see that what you're saying. Can I ask you one more thing, if you don't mind? I'm holding
Well,
you up here.
sure. I very much love this conversation. This was like one of the best conversations I have in ages. What is it?
That's great. Yeah, so excellent. Same here. I'm going to say there's three camps out there. I'm going to call them camps. Maybe three different viewpoints. Maybe that's the idea to say about what mankind, what kind of form we're going to take on into the future. You sort of alluded to one in a way there when you talked about the artificial pancreas and you called it, what was the term you used? Synthetic?
Biosynthetics.
Biosynthetic. Thank you for that. Sorry for my not getting that name right. Okay, so biosynthetic. So you also have others that think, okay, technology. For example, the neural net. Okay, so you're not going to have to type. This is what we're being told. Why have to type anymore? Why get rid of that where we can think and then interface with our smart devices by just thinking. There's that group of people that are working on that, along with AI, and I'm going to say Microsoft is sort of I'm going to say that they're one of the companies that are in the leadership or forefront of all that. Then you have the biotech industry, where they're literally talking about one day having generations where you literally have humans that, as each generation passes, there'll be actually an iteration of improvement from one generation to another until at some point. Do you have any thoughts on that? And I don't want to refer to us as a cyborg or something like that, where technology merges with a human.
Like rule out what exactly? I'm sorry, I was.
Yeah. In other words, the merger of I would say just go as far as to say the merger of tech
Oh, so
hardware.
like the merging of like let's say like cybernetics, like basically like cybernetics.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, what's your thoughts? Is that too? Are people going to reject that? Not that would not ever happen because it's just too out there. Or do you? What are your thoughts on that? I would think the biotech guys have a leg up because it's more about us. You know, if there is something that they could improve on our DNA. You know, well, I'll shut up. You know, for example, you know this better than I do. Supposing the human genome has got something like 4,000 defects in it, or something like this, right?
Yeah.
Uh, what's your yeah? Is that something that actually could, where we could see that are be repaired, where we don't have uh, these defects in the future? Is that something that's actually possible?
So
What
you're
kind of
saying like
science fiction?
are you saying like genetically engineering someone one to like remove like a sort of
Yeah,
genetic defect? Let's say like you're
yeah.
about like once this person gives birth, this person's gonna have like an exposed spine because this expression is like not causing like a full on, it's not being fully expressed. So it's not causing like a full on closing of the spine or something like that. And do I ever see that? I genuinely will say yes. I do see this sort of technology being implemented. So it's something like CRISPR, but like more advanced. It could be, but I think the better question would be like if it's possible, and it does happen, we have like a whole different set of bioethics, which is actually accepted even in biology. You have to take bioethics. So I think the bigger concern is not whether it would exist or not, and is it feasible. I think the better question would be of is it something we are willing to accept, and if so, will it be affordable, or will the state like cover something? So like for example, in like some nations they have like universal healthcare. Would they count that as like universal healthcare where yeah, if your child's about to be born with like this birth defect, we'll cover that. Will like people like accept that? And for those that do accept it, would it be something? What would it basically come down to? Like what deserves to be fixed so that eventually, at least, again going further in bioethics, is will this lead to this idea of what we call eugenics? So I think the better question would, at least in my honest opinion, is like simply dumb it down. The best question would be of not whether this technology is acceptable, will be accepted or feasible, because at that point that's like more of a personal thing. I think it would be more of what is something that needs to be fixed, and will it have to be covered by the state or by individuals? And if it, and whichever one you choose, you got a whole different sets of issues. And then it's like it comes down to the ethical debates, and I could go on for that, but I think I have already wasted like people's enough time on this. But if I was to
Yeah, well,
really
no,
say
this
it,
is great.
if I was to like
I think
simply
it is
say
a
it,
very important.
it
Yeah.
bioethics. Just remember that it's
Yes.
just bioethics.
You have to remember that. Yeah. Graphics. Yes, and you know, and he's bringing up guys just sort of just let me say this as a side comment. You know, once again, money. So it makes you wonder. You know, would wealthy, super wealthy individuals, you know, that have access to bioengineering, would they be able to, you know, outperform or have children in essence that are you know just that much better than we are? You know, it does make you wonder if that's what it comes down to. If someone had the wherewithal and that science was there, could they manipulate things in such a way that their you know their children are else you'd like to say, or we want to cover, or you need to get going?
Uh,
Maybe for another.
I really, honestly, I really got nothing else to say. This was like really one of the best conversations. I mean, I could go to like the bioethics debate, and I would actually like want to know like a bit, like, because the thing about like entering this bioethics is because, and I want to point this one out, is that even though I'm only getting like a bachelor's and you don't take, I think like bioethics until like you go to graduate school, that's like when you really go into it, because that's when you get a chance to conduct your own research. You know, like working for someone else, you get the chance to make your own research. Um, but I think it's very much important to talk about bioethics right now, and I think I can maybe talk about that. The one of which of who could really afford it. Like we're entering the camp of either the wealthy could get it or is it covered by state. And I want to get more to the idea, because I feel as though like for the wealthy one, that's already been covered enough. I want to focus more on the state one because it raises the real question. What deserves to be called a fix? Right? So like, do we consider something like blindness a problem? Or for many of us, we could like say yes, because it debilitates you from getting as many opportunities, many different types of jobs. So you don't get to experience the world as much. Like, you know, blindness is, let's really put it, it is very much debilitating. You don't get a chance to experience the beauty of the world as much. Like, you don't get a chance to like see colors. Like, there are even people who are colorblind too, and they don't get a chance to like see the vastness of different array of colors. Was, if you have ever had like sort of ever like used your phone and you just like set it to like black and white, right? It's basically like that, and you can like really see, and then like you put like a black and white, and then like you compare it to like colored, and you like see, yeah, there's like a drastic difference. It's especially like how colors can be able to make symbolism and expression. So when we look at something like that, would we consider blindness or even color blindness as a disease? Well, sorry, I wouldn't say a disease. That's a bit of a very strong word in this case. I would say more like a disability. And I would say, yeah, it's very much. So if we remove that, we'd like say no more blindness. Here is like all the coverage to that, and no one can like be blind anymore. And it can go like, okay, I can see that. But then you enter something like, well, what about dwarfism? You know, like people who are like born short. Is that what we would call a well, is that like something that deserves to be fixed? And if you even like go say, well, yeah, that deserves to be. Well, what if we go even further than that? Eventually get something like, well, I'm 5'6", but I want to be 6'5". Right. Or like sometimes like they even say for all soldiers of this nation, all soldiers have to at least be a minimum of like, let's say 6 feet tall. Well, and technically the military does have requirements for heights, right? They do have like requirements for heights and weights. And one of those, like, if you want to join, then you have to get this genetic. We'll cover it for you. Of course, like you pass. It's just like you need to get this genetic. And I think like at this point, it gets kind of like that sense of, oh man, it's a really big argument. It raises a question of like, what is something that needs to be fixed, and what needs to be fixed? What is like deserving of the name problematic or disability or issue? And I actually have no idea. Like, this is like one of those where I could say, as of right now, I don't fully know. I will say blindness is a disability. Although when it comes down to like height, I think like that's not as much of a disability. That's just like more cosmetic. So this is like where it basically comes down to. It's like, what is a problem and what's not a problem?
announced run as president for president on the very platform of regarding a health issue and to raise awareness for that very thing. I'm not sure what exactly the health issue was, but this was a cause that one of the Kennedys, from I'm not sure what branch, I don't know what brother or what. I think it was Robert. I think it was one of Robert's son, because he had, I think Robert had 10 or 11 children between him and Ethel Kennedy. So I think it was one of his sons that put his hat in the ring. So no, you're right. This is what this is what it's all what you're saying. Because why? Because if you adopted if you don't have this rigorous review relative to what we can do, one day we will be able to do those things you're talking about. I mean, it could literally become so expensive that the state, you want to call it the state, our nation, taxpayers, it just would be not affordable. May not be affordable. I just don't know what the cost would be initially would be, that what we'd be looking at associated with correcting. You might have some thoughts on that. Would that be something where it's just not be in the realm of affordability, regardless of the problem? Maybe it's something that once you fix it, or you identify the fix, maybe it's so low cost. I just don't have any idea. But maybe it is. Maybe it's something would be almost next to nothing. That once you know how to correct something like that, like blindness, or prevent it,
Is
So
that
maybe cost would be an issue going forward in the future, which would be marvelous.
I
Doesn't seem to be always the.
one way I usually like argue on the idea about like why should we like go treat, for example, like what like conditions like ones that we can treat, like for example like blindness, is that, well, if we the reason why is because then they would be less of a drain on the state, and they can now work, they can now experience, they would be much more happy. And like if they can be able to work, that means you got like productivity, because now they can see. like
True.
like
Absolutely.
like you like if you have like a lot of people,
We,
like if you like need like, let's say like more pilots, how can someone be a pilot if they're blind? How could like someone like be a nurse
right.
if they're blind?
Right.
Like these people have aspirations, just like me. I have aspirations, I have dreams, and many others even have dreams. And so, well, if we cover that for them, they could be able to get that dream, and they can be able to give back to the state.
Yes. Right. No, that's so true. And so this is the excellent point you're making. So there's a cost benefit. There's this weighing of correcting a problem, and as a result of preventing an illness or blindness or something of this nature, then actually what you're doing is the overall good to the general public is going to be far outweighing any cost to treat the issue. So you can take individuals that may otherwise, as you say, may actually, and I hate to say it like this, but they're receiving benefits, but in this case they would become productive in the sense that they wouldn't need some of this, maybe some of the support that they otherwise would be required, due to their illness. So this is fascinating to discuss. Look at the paradigm shift that you're talking about. It's amazing. It's great. So I think you brought a lot of attention to this topic, and using blindness as an example. It just goes to show you that this is something that will transcend anybody that is blind. In so many ways. I mean, it would just be almost almost revolutionary in that sense, for that individual. So excellent, excellent, excellent. Um, so with that, let's see. Let's try to tie this up together and just make sense of maybe the future. Do you see? What do you see? Are we talking maybe a few years out, 5 years out, 10 years out, that as a society we're going to have to actually grapple with some of these decisions to start actually having to deal with this, or is this still some number of decades away?
Um. Uh. I'm not entirely sure. Like the genetic engineering part, and the biosynthetic one, I feel as though this is like more entering the debate about people who are, they're already wealthy, they already have money, and they can be able to cover the cost for that. That's like entering a different debate. I think. I think like for like the genetic engineering entering eventually leading to what's known as like eugenics. I think that in a way, I think we somewhat already have something like that. So a way in which I think like one of it is like you can't donate your sperm if you're like a certain type of individual. I think like they actually like take like quality of sperm, like sperm banks. I think like they actually like, consider quality of the sperm, or maybe not. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I don't think they actually do. But that might become a thing eventually. It's like, well, what if we do find something that might be problematic of the sperm that this person cannot donate? I don't know. I don't think like that's there yet. But eventually, I think if we're able to like, I guess you say CRISPR that out, or even like if we're able to like figure it out and then say you can't donate because you have this type of genetic disability. Yeah, I think that might actually be a case. But as of right now, no, I don't really. I think that's like more like future ahead, but it doesn't hurt. I will say it doesn't hurt to have these discussions now, because you even still have to have these discussions even in graduate school. But
Yes, oh sure, I'm sure this is being debated. I do. I think that let's face it, we're be naive if there aren't conversations being held at this minute. I mean, I say this minute. Elsewhere, in maybe closed door sessions, at very high levels, not within our own government, but some government somewhere, there could be actually these kinds of things that policymakers are actually starting to begin to formulate some type of thought process around. So for example, you hear about the wealthy. You bring up a very good point, just to make a point, just to kind of crystallize this thinking. And then as you do hear about people that do say they want a baby that has blue eyes or something, and that this is possible, and they go someplace, whoever it is, in some clinic someplace, and this is something that happens. Is that? Do you think that's is that fiction or is that real? Just even something as simple as
oh man, so the idea of like customized babies. What you're saying, like
I've actually heard.
Designer babies is also another name they call them. The designer babies, customized babies. Oh man.
Heard this. I don't know if it's real or if it's fiction or
As of right now,
but
it is a fake. But if we I was even thinking about this. I I know it's a bit sidetracked, and I don't usually want to insert this, but I feel as though it's a good idea because I was even thinking of this. I call it like a birth factories, and birth factories are this idea of designer citizens. So like kind of like in vitro fertilization, but we put it in an artificial womb. So we take like the zygote, we put it inside an artificial womb, and then as it starts to like grow and develop, as it grows and develops, it's basically like it grows into like a baby. But this baby, we modified it along the way where it's like now the type of standardization that we will want. Like it needs to be this set minimum height. It needs to have this type of color. This one's like more anthropomorphic creatures. It's not humans. This is anthropomorphic creatures. So it's like tigers and lions, or wolves, and all these other creatures. But basically the point is, they have to be like this height. They have to have this type of gene to be able to lift this type of weight, or lift these like heavy weights, and so on and so on. So it's kind of like standardization, like baseline. Here's the genetics that we want, and all United citizens are expected to have this. And when it comes down to that one, well, I know that one's like more nation, and what you're asking is like more designer babies, but I want to look at like let me focus back on designer babies, because in this case, it's one of those like I want them to have this, I want them to have that, I want the child to have this and that, and I think in a way it can be problematic depending on the circumstance. So one idea is they say, oh, you can only have this if you can afford the modification package. Like you can't design your baby like this certain way. Only those with this exclusive package can have that. Like that idea, I say, is absurd, because it's like, you're pricing people out. But looking past that, well, do you want to like add something to that one though? Or do you like?
No. This is where I will take us, because this is exactly what I think is. I just have a sneaking suspicion that what you're describing is that's where it always starts. It starts with the wealthy, and it always seems to start with like it's. I think you're so spot on with what you're just saying right there. That if this comes to pass, I can't help but think that somewhere, somehow, the wealthy will pursue this. Not all of them, but I do think there are. I just think it's inevitable. They live in such a. When I say wealthy, I'm talking the super wealthy, which we have. This environment that we're in now. There's no other time where we've had the degree of wealth that some of these individuals have. You and I can't even begin to fathom the world they live in. They live in a world that we just can't even conceive of. And I'm being dead serious when I say that. So there's no limits, there's no bounds for some of these individuals. And I just think that if they have access to a clinic that claims or professes or actually is able to do this, I think that you're absolutely correct. What you just described, that this would come to pass. So it's just food for thought. It's just. I think this is inevitable, and you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's gonna happen.
Oh yeah,
that's the way it will probably be.
Yeah. And I very much enjoyed this conversation. I wish we could go talk for hours, but as of right now, it's very much late in my area, and I'm starting to get tired.
Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough for your time. I appreciate it so much. You've been great. Thank you for indulging me in all my pursuit some questions. You've been fascinating.
That-
Come back. I say come. I feel like I'm a host now. Come back and see me. If I get on again. All right.
Did you follow me back, by the way?
Yes, let me do it right now. I'm showing my age. Hang on one second.
Thank you for that, man. Again, it was very nice to talk to you again. All right. Think you disconnected. Well, I'll message him back. On a serious note, though. Oh wait.
Message me back because I'm having a terrible time here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, man.
He's gonna. Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Goodbye, Dan. Like, that was awesome. That was like one of the best conversations. This was even better than the criminologist one. This was beyond the best conversation I've ever had. That was fantastic. And I know I got kind of like a bit of rambly occasionally, but even then, I just I think it was great. Anyway, thank you all so much for being here, for dealing with the rambles, dealing with the conversation, dealing with the weirdness of all this. Very much sorry I couldn't be able to do this fully, but it was truly nice. It was one of I cannot thank you all enough for like being here, for watching, doing all that. And I will see you all next time when I